I arrived home a few hours earlier than usual, feeling oddly restless from the start. Normally, my return would be a comforting routine, but tonight something felt off the moment I stepped through the door. The silence was almost oppressive, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I dropped my keys in the usual bowl near the door, but my eyes were immediately drawn to another set of keys, Lauren's keys, resting on the table by the entrance. I've never seen them left out like that before, and the unsettling discrepancy sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I moved cautiously down the hallway, each step echoing in the quiet. When I reached our bedroom, I hesitated at the doorway. Peeking inside, I saw Lauren in a flurry, trying to dress quickly, her eyes darting about with an intensity that made my heart pound. It wasn't just the speed of her movements that caught my attention. The bed was a stark testament to an unspoken truth. There were unmistakable signs that another had been there recently, a presence that still lingered in the disarrayed sheets and the subtle disturbance of personal items. I stood there frozen, my mind racing to piece together what was happening. My thoughts churned with questions. Who could have been in our home? Why was Lauren reacting with such urgency? The atmosphere was thick with tension, and for a moment, I felt as if I had stepped into a scene from a movie. Only this was our reality. Every instinct screamed that nothing was as it should be, and I braced myself for the conversation that I knew was inevitable. It was in that suspended moment, the air heavy with unspoken worries, that I realized how quickly the familiar can turn foreign. I knew that nothing in our lives had prepared me for this disquieting twist of fate, and deep down, I sensed that whatever was unfolding would change everything I thought I understood about trust, safety, and the bonds that hold us together. I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. Standing in our bedroom, as if he belonged there, Richard Blake was every inch the man I'd seen on TV. Immaculate suit, perfectly combed hair, and an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. His presence was surreal, like a scene from a movie I never auditioned for. I felt my pulse quicken, anger and disbelief mingling in a cocktail of emotions that threatened to spill over. Lauren's voice trembled as she began to speak, her words tumbling out in a rush of justification and accusation. "Alex, you've been so distant lately. It's like you've moved away from me. I've been trying to tell you, but you never listen." Her tone wasn't pleading or remorseful. It was laced with bitterness and an undercurrent of resentment that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't merely a reaction to the intrusion. It was an outpouring of years of unaddressed pain and silent suffering. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Here was Richard, calmly smiling in the background as if nothing was amiss, while my wife launched into a tirade about my supposed neglect over the past 15 years. The words stung, each syllable slicing through the fragile remnants of trust one thought we had built over a lifetime. I felt trapped between a flood of emotions, betrayal, humiliation, and a simmering rage that demanded to be unleashed. Richard's smile, cheeky and infuriatingly serene, only served to stoke the flames of my anger. There he stood, as if he were the only one in the room with a claim to some hidden truth. "I suppose you never imagined I'd be part of your little domestic drama," he remarked coolly, his tone carrying an unsettling mix of amusement and superiority. His eyes, dark and calculating, flicked between Lauren and me as if he were savoring every second of the chaos he'd helped create. The air in the room thickened, charged with an intensity that left no room for calm discussion. Every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't just about an unexpected visitor. It was about the deep fissures that had been widening in our marriage, fissures that I had been too blind or too stubborn to see. Lauren's accusations, though jarring and painful, suddenly began to take on a different hue. Was it a desperate attempt to deflect responsibility? Or had I, in my own way, been failing her, even if I hadn't realized it until now? I took a step forward, my voice low and controlled despite the storm raging inside me. "Lauren, what are you saying? That I'm the one who's been drifting away? How can you say that when you've brought a complete stranger into our home?" My words were sharp, laced with the disbelief of someone who felt cornered by the truth of his own life. But before I could press further, Richard interjected with a chuckle that echoed around the room. It seems to me that we're all just playing our parts in a farce, isn't it? He said, his tone mocking yet disturbingly sincere. His nonchalance in the face of such raw emotion was infuriating. He continued, his eyes glinting with mischief. Perhaps it's time we acknowledged that this marriage, like all things, has its complications. Maybe Lauren's been waiting for someone to show you what you've been missing all these years. My blood boiled at his insinuation. Richard's words were not only an intrusion into a very personal moment, but they were also a calculated provocation, designed to fan the flames of resentment and misunderstanding. I could feel the walls of our shared history crumbling, each brick dislodged by his every carefully chosen remark. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just an unexpected visitor. It was a man who had, in some twisted way, become the embodiment of everything that was wrong in our lives. Lauren's eyes filled with a mixture of defiance and regret, her voice faltering as she tried to navigate the maze of her own emotions. "I never meant for it to come to this," she whispered, the strength in her tone cracking as the weight of the moment bore down on her. But Richard wasn't about to let the tension die down. He stepped closer, his smile never wavering as he added, "Sometimes the truth has a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected circumstances. Perhaps this is the moment you both need to confront what's been hidden for far too long." I felt as though I were caught in a vice. His words, laced with a twisted wisdom, made me question everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Had I truly been so oblivious? Was there a part of me that had allowed this distance to grow, even if unintentionally? The room seemed to pulse with a weight of unspoken confessions and long-suppressed regrets. In that charged silence, my mind raced, seeking answers while drowning in a sea of betrayal and confusion. I squared my shoulders, determined not to let Richard's calm demeanor undermine the storm of emotions inside me. "This isn't a discussion about who's at fault," I finally managed, my voice steady despite the tumult. "It's about facing the reality of what's happened here. Lauren, I need you to be honest with me. What is it that you're really trying to say?" Richard's laughter was soft, almost imperceptible, as if he were privy to some cosmic joke at our expense. His presence was a constant reminder that the truth wasn't as clear-cut as I'd once believed. And in that moment, as the three of us stood in the dim light of our shared past and uncertain future, I realized that our lives were about to change in ways I could never have anticipated. Richard's eyes glinted with a cold amusement as he reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. The bills fanned out in his hand, a dazzling display of wealth that left no doubt. The amount easily exceeded $50,000. Without a hint of remorse, he tossed the money at my feet and sneered, "Be a man, Alex, just leave." The crisp sound of paper hitting the hardwood floor echoed in the charged silence, each flutter of the bills mocking everything I'd ever believed about honor and integrity. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the money like a cursed talisman. The thick wad was an insult, a slap in the face that attempted to buy my silence and erase the gravity of the situation. The sight of it, combined with Richard's condescending tone, sent a surge of heat through my veins. I clenched my fists, feeling my anger mutate into a cold, steely determination that froze every emotion into a single, unyielding resolve. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I knelt down to pick up a stray bill, only to let it fall back to the floor. "I'm not taking your money," I said, my voice low and firm, echoing off the walls. "You think that cash can buy me off or erase what you've done? I refuse to be complicit in your game." My words hung in the air, heavy with defiance. Every syllable was laced with the knowledge that I had been drawn into a confrontation that was far larger than either Richard or the twisted dynamics of my crumbling marriage. Richard's smile only widened, a smug expression that suggested he expected submission rather than a fight. "Oh, come on, Alex. Just leave and save us all the trouble," he taunted, his tone dripping with superiority. But I wasn't about to be swayed by his crude challenge. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't merely a personal dispute. It was an attack on everything I stood for, a challenge to the integrity of a man who had weathered countless storms only to have someone like him try to dictate my worth with a wad of cash. I pushed myself up, rising to face him with unwavering resolve. The room seemed to shrink around us, the air thick with tension and unspoken histories. My heart pounded with a mixture of anger and a grim determination. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for my pride. I was fighting for the remnants of my dignity, for every person whose life had been upended by Richard's reckless pursuit of power and control. His arrogance had already shattered lives, and I wasn't about to let him think he could ruin mine without a fight. You talk about being a man as if it's a simple thing, I replied, my voice steady yet laced with venom. But I'm not going anywhere. I refuse to let you or anyone else define me by the amount of money they throw around. Your cash isn't going to buy my silence or erase the pain you've inflicted on so many. My gaze hardened as I met his eyes, a silent promise that I would stand my ground no matter how far he pushed. Every word was a declaration of war, a war against the notion that wealth could be wielded like a weapon against human decency. Richard's expression shifted, the playful mockery in his eyes giving way to something more calculating, almost as if he recognized that I wasn't the pushover he had expected. "You're making a mistake, Alex," he said softly, his tone now layered with a hint of something else, perhaps regret, or maybe it was just the beginning of a deeper game he intended to play. "You really think you can stand up to me, knowing what you're up against?" His words were a subtle threat, a reminder of the power he wielded over so many lives, including mine. But I wasn't swayed. My mind raced with memories of those ruined lives, friends, acquaintances, even strangers whose paths had been altered forever by the fallout of Richard's indiscretions. I had seen firsthand how the allure of wealth and power could blind people to the cost of their actions, and I knew that I couldn't allow that same fate to befall me. Standing there, in the midst of shattered trust and twisted ambition, I resolved that I would fight back with every ounce of strength and conviction I possessed. I would not let Richard's arrogance dictate the course of my life, nor would I let him trample over the legacy of those he had already destroyed. In that moment, I embraced the reality that my struggle wasn't just about reclaiming my dignity. It was about taking a stand against a system that measured worth in dollars and cents. With a final, defiant glare at Richard, I turned away from the wad of cash scattered at my feet. My mind was set, my determination forged in the crucible of humiliation and betrayal. I was not leaving, and I wasn't backing down. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to face the consequences, no matter how daunting the fight ahead might be. I stood there, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife, when I instinctively reached for my phone. With shaking hands, I began to search for any shred of information about Richard, a move driven by a mix of fury and desperation. As I typed his name into the search bar, I expected to find the usual financial headlines and business profiles. Instead, what emerged was a personal side of him that I'd never known existed. According to several public records and even a few tabloid reports, Richard Blake wasn't the unencumbered playboy I had assumed he was. He was married to a woman named Vanessa, and he had 2 children with her. The revelation hit me like a sucker punch. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marital vows or a mere extramarital affair. This was something far more insidious, a well-orchestrated scheme. The more I read, the more I realized that every move, every calculated decision, had been planned with a precision that went beyond a simple dalliance. There were hints and subtle signals that pointed to a deeper connection between Lauren and Richard. For a fleeting moment, the pieces began to align in a picture I wished I could unsee. Had Lauren known about Richard's true life all along? Had our life together been nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, designed to hide secrets that were slowly poisoning our marriage? I looked over at Lauren, whose face had been etched with frustration and bitterness just moments ago. But now, as I locked eyes with her, something else was there, a glimmer of fear. It wasn't the usual indifference I'd come to expect from her in times of conflict. It was a raw, palpable terror that she couldn't hide. In that moment, I realized that the truth was far more complex than I had ever imagined. The evidence on my phone painted a picture of a man who was manipulating more than just my trust and a woman who had been complicit in a plan that would destroy lives. My heart pounded in my chest as I grappled with the implications of what I'd just discovered. A surge of determination coursed through me. I couldn't let this lie continue to fester. I had to tell Vanessa, Richard's unsuspecting wife, what was truly going on. It wasn't just about exposing Richard's deception. It was about saving Vanessa from the web of lies that had ensnared her. I imagined her, a gentle soul perhaps oblivious to the dark undercurrents swirling around her husband, caught in the crossfire of a scheme far larger than any of us had anticipated. The thought of her suffering the consequences of this deceit ignited a burning need for justice inside me. Before I could speak, however, Lauren lunged forward, her hand outstretched as if to physically block my next move. "No, Alex," she pleaded, her voice trembling with urgency. "Don't do it." Her eyes, wide and desperate, were a stark contrast to the calm mask she'd worn just moments before. The fear in them was unmistakable, and it chilled me to the core. This wasn't a simple spat or a misunderstanding. This was a desperate attempt to keep a catastrophic secret from unraveling further. Her sudden intervention only deepened the mystery. What was Lauren so terrified of? Could it be that she had orchestrated this all along, keeping the truth hidden behind a veneer of marital normalcy? The question echoed in my mind as I looked at her, searching for any sign of deceit or remorse. But all I saw was a woman trapped in her own web of lies, fear, and perhaps even regret. The facade she had maintained for so many years was cracking, and I was witnessing the raw, unfiltered consequences of that collapse. "I'm telling Vanessa," I declared, my voice firm despite the swirling emotions inside me. "She deserves to know the truth." My words hung in the air, heavy with both resolve and sorrow. It was as if I were simultaneously breaking free from the chains of our shared past and condemning us all to face the harsh reality of our choices. The plan had been meticulously laid out by someone I had once trusted implicitly, and now, with every word I spoke, the dam of secrets was on the verge of bursting. Lauren's protest was immediate and vehement. "You don't understand, Alex. This isn't just about him. It's about us, about everything we've built. If Vanessa finds out," her voice trailed off into a whisper, laden with a mix of guilt and terror. The pause that followed was deafening, as if the universe itself were holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In that charged moment, I could no longer deny the depth of the deception. Lauren wasn't just a bystander in this sordid affair. She was an active participant, and her fears spoke volumes about the stakes involved. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the labyrinth of lies that had ensnared us all. Each revelation was like another thread unraveling in a tapestry that had once seemed unbreakable. I thought about the life we had shared, the promises, the quiet evenings, the dreams of a future built on trust. Now, that future was hanging by a thread, threatened by the very secrets we had buried deep within our hearts. I took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the weight of every decision that had led us to this moment. "Lauren, I won't let him hurt any more people," I said softly, my voice laced with a determination that surprised even me. "Vanessa has a right to know what's really going on." It was a declaration not just of defiance, but of the moral imperative that had driven me to this point. The path ahead was uncertain, and the consequences could be devastating, but I knew that I couldn't live in the shadow of someone else's lies any longer. In that quiet, tension-filled space, I realized that our lives had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion, destined to crumble under the weight of the truth. And as I prepared to take the next step, one that would shatter the delicate balance of our lives, I couldn't help but wonder if there was any going back. The road to redemption was fraught with pain, but I was ready to face it head-on, driven by a need for justice, truth, and the hope that perhaps, in the aftermath, we might find a way to rebuild from the ruins of our shattered trust. The moment I hit Vanessa's contact on my phone, my gut twisted in anticipation. I barely had time to process my racing thoughts before a deafening roar shattered the stillness outside. Rushing to the window, I saw a black armored Cadillac Escalade screech to a halt in front of my house. The vehicle's presence was imposing, a rolling fortress of wealth and menace that couldn't be ignored. Before I could even register what was happening, the door swung open, and two burly men in impeccably tailored, expensive suits stepped out with a coordinated, almost mechanical precision. They moved with an intimidating calm, their eyes scanning the surroundings as if expecting trouble at every corner. I barely had time to think about escaping when they reached the door and, without any further warning, stormed into my living room. My protest died in my throat as their grip on my arms was ironclad. In a few swift, disconcerting moments, I was roughly dragged out of the house, my struggles muffled by their unwavering hold. Once outside, the night air hit me hard, a brutal contrast to the heated turmoil inside. My heart pounded in my ears as I was pushed closer to the waiting vehicle. I glanced up at the limousine, its sleek, impenetrable design a grim reminder of the power behind it. The sound of the engine idling filled the silence that now stretched between us, each second amplifying my dread. Then, as if orchestrated by some dark director, the rear door of the Escalade swung open. Emerging from the shadows was Richard himself. There he stood, cool and composed, his eyes devoid of any trace of emotion. Every step he took exuded an aura of authority and menace that left no room for negotiation. Before I could even comprehend the gravity of his presence, Richard strode over to me with measured steps. Without a single word, he reached out and snatched my phone from my hand. I tried to react, but his grip was as cold and unyielding as the steel of his resolve. I could only watch, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and disbelief, as he inspected the device for a brief moment before tucking it away into the inner pocket of his suit. The silence that followed was more piercing than any barrage of words. Richard's expression remained unchanged, implacable and steely, as he fixed his gaze on me. In that unyielding stare, he conveyed a message louder than any shout ever could. His eyes hinted at a clear and terrifying ultimatum. I needed to disappear, or the consequences would be fatal. The weight of his silent threats sank in like a stone in my gut. I could feel every heartbeat pounding in my ears, each one a stark reminder of how dangerously close I was to the edge. My mind raced frantically, desperately trying to compute what had just transpired and what lay ahead. The carefully laid plans and schemes that had been unraveling in my life were now overshadowed by this stark, unrelenting display of power. In that bleak moment, I realized that this wasn't simply about an extramarital affair or a tangled web of deceit anymore. It was about control, absolute, unyielding control, wielded by a man who was ready to erase anyone who dared threaten his empire. Richard's silent command was not just a warning. It was an order backed by an arsenal of hidden resources and a network of loyal enforcers. The mere fact that he was willing to physically remove me from my own home and confiscate my phone signified that I had stepped into a world where his rules were the only ones that mattered. As I stood there, hands bound by invisible chains of fear and realization, a cold clarity began to seep into my thoughts. The chaos of my crumbling personal life, the revelations of betrayal, and the betrayal of trust, all of it paled in comparison to the looming threat that now faced me. I was entangled in a dangerous game where the stakes were my very existence, and the rules were dictated by a man who seemed immune to remorse or compassion. I tried to speak, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and terror, but no words came out. Richard's look said it all: disappear or suffer the fatal consequences. The world around me seemed to contract into a single, oppressive point of no return. I knew I was at a crossroads, forced to decide whether to confront this dark labyrinth head-on or retreat into the shadows of fear. In that charged silence, as the two men maintained their unyielding vigil and Richard's gaze bore into me, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not let him erase me without a fight. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to hide, to disappear into oblivion. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance ignited, a promise that I would find a way out, a way to reclaim my life from the grip of this formidable enemy. The night had just grown darker, and as I stood there, on the precipice of a fate I never chose. I realized that my next steps would either seal my doom or ignite a rebellion that could change everything. The silence was suffocating, and in that chilling moment, the path ahead became a silent battleground of willpower, determination, and the desperate need for survival. Before I could even catch my breath, one of Richard's imposing guards stepped forward with an air of ruthless efficiency. Without warning, he drove a heavy fist into my stomach. The impact was like a sledgehammer, forcing me to collapse to my knees. The shock and pain radiated through me, and for a moment, the world narrowed down to that single, brutal blow. I looked up, my vision blurred by the sting of the impact, and saw Lauren standing a few feet away. She was trying to maintain her composure, her face a mask of calm. But in her eyes, I saw the unmistakable glimmer of fear. It was the same fear that had gripped me moments earlier when Richard's silent warning had spoken volumes. Now, watching her flinch and hesitate, I realized that she wasn't as in control as she pretended to be. In that fleeting moment, the cracks in her facade became undeniable. Richard's voice, cold and devoid of emotion, broke through the oppressive silence. "Consider this a friendly warning, Alex," he said, his tone as chilling as the bite of the cold night air. "Next time, you won't get off with just a few blows." His words hung in the space between us like a noose tightening around my neck. Each syllable was a reminder that this wasn't a random act of violence. It was a calculated display of power and control, a message meant to keep me in check. I struggled to rise, my body protesting with every movement, every shallow breath a reminder of the pain. The sound of the Cadillac's engine revving signaled the imminent departure of Richard and his enforcers. As the sleek vehicle pulled away, its taillights receding into the darkness, the silence that followed was suffocating. The night, which had already been heavy with dread and betrayal, now felt more oppressive than ever. My eyes locked onto Lauren's, and despite the agony that pulsed through my battered body, I forced myself to speak. "Lauren," I managed, my voice raw and strained, "we need to talk." There was no room for pleasantries or denial now. The stakes were higher than ever before. I needed to know if she was as trapped in this dangerous web as I was. Her eyes darted away for a split second, and I could see her heart pounding in her face. The fear in them wasn't just for me. It was for her too. I took a ragged breath, summoning every ounce of courage left in me despite the searing pain. "Tell me the truth, Lauren," I insisted, my voice barely more than a whisper, but laced with a determination that defied the threat lingering in the air. "Are you in danger too? Are you part of this? Or have you been trapped by it all along?" Lauren hesitated, her eyes flickering with a torrent of emotions. Guilt, fear, and something I hadn't expected, desperation. The silence stretched between us as she wavered, the weight of her secret threatening to crush her. Finally, her voice trembled as she replied, "Yes, Alex. I am scared. I never wanted it to go this far, but I've been in too deep for a long time." Her admission was like a knife to my already shattered heart. All those years together, all the moments we had shared, now felt like illusions built on a foundation of lies. My body still ached from the blow, yet the emotional pain surged far deeper than any physical injury. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, my tone a mixture of anguish and fury. "Why hide it if you're just as afraid?" Lauren's eyes welled up with tears, and her voice wavered as she tried to explain. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could control everything. Keep you safe, keep us safe. But I was wrong, Alex. I'm scared for both of us." Her confession, so raw and honest, resonated in the quiet aftermath of our ordeal. In that heart-wrenching moment, the truth of our predicament was undeniable. Richard's brutal warning wasn't just meant for me. It was a stark reminder that neither of us was safe from the web of deceit and violence that had ensnared our lives. The danger wasn't just external. It was something that had infiltrated the very foundation of our marriage. I steadied myself, the pain still throbbing in my midsection, and met Lauren's tear-filled gaze with a mix of sorrow and resolve. "Then we need to fix this, Lauren," I said, my voice firm despite the lingering pain. We need to figure out how to get out of this mess together. I won't let him, or anyone, destroy what's left of our lives without a fight. The night had turned into a battleground of emotions and revelations. And as I looked at Lauren, I realized that our next steps would define everything. Our shared fear, our collective secret, and the specter of Richard's ruthless power were now interwoven into the very fabric of our existence. With every breath, every heartbeat, the reality of our danger loomed larger, and I knew that the time for denial was over. We had to confront the darkness, together, no matter the cost. I didn't waste a second after the Cadillac disappeared into the night. Every instinct screamed that staying any longer would only compound our misery. I grabbed Lauren by the arm, my voice low but insistent. "Pack your things. Now, we can't stay here." The words left little room for debate. Both of us were now unwanted witnesses, entangled in a dangerous game we never signed up for. Lauren's eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment she hesitated as if trying to convince herself that this was all just a terrible nightmare. "Alex, what are you saying?" she whispered, her tone a mix of panic and confusion. I shook my head, my mind racing with the gravity of our situation. There was no time for explanations or reassurances. "We have to leave immediately. You're in danger, and so am I." The urgency in my voice left no room for negotiation. Reluctantly, Lauren turned to the task at hand. She moved methodically, stuffing a few essential items into a battered suitcase as I kept one eye on the street, my senses on high alert. The fear that had clouded her expression earlier was now unmistakable, but underneath that fear was a spark of resolve that mirrored my own. I knew that even if she didn't fully understand the full extent of our predicament, she trusted that I wasn't leading us into a dead end. We piled into my car and drove through the darkened streets, the city's neon lights fading into a blur as we headed for an expensive hotel on the outskirts. The drive was tense. Every red light, every unexpected turn, reminded me that we were fugitives in our own lives. The hotel, a gleaming symbol of wealth and temporary refuge, welcomed us with an eerie silence, as if it too were hiding secrets behind its polished facade. Inside the hotel room, the sterile luxury did little to alleviate the storm raging in my mind. I sat on the edge of the king-size bed, the soft hum of the air conditioner contrasting sharply with the chaos of my thoughts. Lauren was a quiet presence by the window, her back turned as she stared out at the rain-slicked street. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything, the brutality, the betrayal, the urgent need to escape, pressed down on us like a physical force. As I lay back against the cool sheets, a single, relentless thought began to take shape in my mind. Richard had made a grave mistake by leaving me alive. I replayed the night's events over and over. The cold sneer on his face, the violent grip of his men, the silent command that I must vanish. It wasn't merely that he wanted me gone. It was clear that his plans were far more calculated. I wasn't just collateral damage in his scheme. I was a loose end he intended to tie up permanently if given half a chance. The realization ignited a dangerous determination within me. I wasn't going to simply cower in the shadows while he continued his reign of calculated cruelty. No, his arrogance had given me the very fuel I needed to fight back. My mind began to form a plan, a way to level the playing field, to exact revenge for every life he'd shattered, starting with mine. I pictured his opulent office, the smug smile he wore when dismissing threats, and I vowed that he would learn just how high the price of betrayal could be. Lauren's quiet breathing eventually broke the silence, pulling me back from my dark reverie. I turned to face her, noting the way her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape from the present reality. "Lauren," I said softly but firmly, "we're not safe here, not anywhere, not as long as he's out there." The vulnerability in her expression was now laced with something else: regret. "Tell me, do you understand just how dangerous this has become?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my voice catching in my throat as I confessed. "He left me alive tonight, and I know it wasn't by accident. Richard thinks that by silencing me, he can keep his secrets hidden. But he's made a mistake, one that I intend to correct. The conviction in my words surprised even me. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was a cold, calculated promise of retribution. Lauren's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she finally spoke. Then what do we do now? Her question was simple, but loaded with the fear of the unknown. I stood up, pushing away the remnants of despair that clung to me. We plan. We gather every bit of evidence, every scrap of truth, and we use it against him. I'm going to ruin his life just as he's ruined mine. And if you're with me, we'll do it together. In that moment, the hotel room transformed from a temporary sanctuary into a war room. Every piece of furniture, every shadow on the wall, seemed to bear witness to our newfound resolve. I could almost hear the ticking of the clock, counting down the moments until our next move, a move that would force Richard out of his comfortable world of power and control. I knew that our path would be treacherous. There would be risks, sacrifices, and the constant threat of a retaliation so severe it might leave us both unrecognizable. Yet, the taste of betrayal was far too bitter to accept passively. I was determined to expose every dark corner of Richard's empire, to drag every hidden secret into the harsh light of truth. And, most importantly, I was determined to reclaim my life piece by shattered piece. As the rain outside intensified, tapping a relentless rhythm against the window, I lay there on the bed with a singular thought echoing in my mind. Richard had underestimated the power of a man scorned. And I was just getting started.